I'd like to discuss the GPS satellites and the Comedy recycling theory. One of the most interesting things about the GPS satellites is that they orbit the Earth twice every day approximately, from an altitude approximately between 20,100 and 20,200 kilometers above us. From the different relativistic formulas that I've looked at, the satellite, because of its speed going around the Earth, loses approximately 7 microseconds a day from the speed that the satellite has, but because it spends its time in lesser gravity up 20,200 kilometers above us, that it gains approximately 45.5 microseconds per day from that spending time in lesser gravitational field. So in the net, the GPS satellite picks up or gains approximately 38 microseconds per day from spending time in a lesser gravitational field. Now, conventional theory has some convoluted explanations for it. The Comedy recycling theory says that it's actually it's gaining more real time, that it's actually spending more real time energy in that position than what we are here on Earth. And again, it's mostly because even though you lose a little bit of time because of the speed that the satellite has going around the Earth, that's about 1/6 of the amount of time that the GPS satellite gains because it's in a lesser gravitational field. That up 20,200 kilometers above us, that the satellite again gains around 45 microseconds per day as far as real time. The Comedy recycling theory says that it actually does spend more real time than we do, whereas if you look at the theory of relativity, says that everything around the universe is real time or is the same, isotropic, the same in all directions. Well, the Comedy recycling theory says that there's actually a preferred reference frame, and that preferred reference frame means that there is not like here, that when you change location, you change position, you're actually changing the amount of real time that an object experiences. And that's why when they set the atomic clocks that are on each of the GPS satellites, they have to slow it down by about 38.5 microseconds per day, because that it's spending most of its time in a lesser gravitational field. Now, it's not much less of a gravitational field, but just the simple fact that it's that much higher up there, that it's gaining approximately 45 microseconds per day. That doesn't sound like a lot, but when you multiply that by E equals mc squared and realize how much actual real-time difference that is and how much energy there is in mass, that's how the Comedy recycling theory says we're actually accounting for the energy, the extra energy that you have to spend to lift that satellite up into that much higher of an orbit, that you're actually putting more energy directly into the satellite, and that it's actually worth that much more energy as compared to if it were sitting right here on level ground. Not quite at sea level, but here on level ground, that it would have or be worth that much less energy here than it would be up there. So that's a very brief snippet of some of the real world activity out there and how the Comedy recycling theory sees it differently than what conventional theory does. Conventional theory has a much more convoluted way of trying to explain where the energy difference is, or why the time is actually that much different. But the Comedy recycling theory says it's basically that there is not the same as here, that it's actually gaining more real time at that, not geosynchronous orbit, but the orbit approximately, again, 20,200 kilometers above us, that in doing so, that it picks up all this extra time. Again, which is not a huge amount of extra time, but 45 microseconds a day does add up over time. And that's where that's actually coming from. Now, the comedy recycling theory would also say that technically speaking, his speed of light up there for the satellite is actually greater than our speed of light would be here on Earth. That's another way of accounting for it. Conventional theory would say, well, but the speed of light is always the same wherever you go. And you could say, if you want to keep it that way, then you still have to account for the real-time difference that the satellite encounters, and that's why they have to slow its atomic clock down, again, by a net 38 microseconds per day, because of the difference between the time that it loses by going faster than we are here on Earth, falling around the Earth, and the time that it gains from spending time in a lesser gravitational field. But the comedy recycling theory says that it's actually picking up more real time, that it's less slowed down than we are here in a greater gravitational field, and that the greater the gravitational field you would sit in or exist in, the slower your real time frame actually becomes. If you were to get very close to a black hole, the closer you approach to a black hole, the slower your time frame actually becomes. And the interesting thing is that your time frame also slows down if you go towards the outer edges of our universe by the comedy recycling theory, because we're entering more curved territory there, and the closer you get to the outer edge, the outer observable edge of the universe is actually the point where the curvature is complete, according to the comedy recycling theory. Time would completely stop at the outer edges of our universe, so the closer you go towards the outer edge of the universe, the slower everything gets. Now there, it's quite a bit slower than it is here. Instead of just a few microseconds a day, it would be on the order of 10% of our real-time rate at where some of the quasars lie, and there are some quasars that might be 5% of a time rate of what our actual time rate here is on planet Earth, according to the comedy recycling theory. Now, conventional theory sees that as our universe is expanding everywhere, and expanding with an expanding expansion. The comedy recycling theory says it's due to a misinterpretation of the fact that conventional theory corrects the observed data. After they observe the data, they say, oh, it must be just like us, and corrects the data and says, aha, to make it just like us, we have to increase its real-time rate by 10 times or 20 times for some quasars, probably even more than that for some of the most distant objects known. But what the comedy recycling theory says is, when we see them, we're actually seeing them at the real-time rate as they experienced it. Now, of course, that was a long time ago that they did experience that, but they're aging at a much slower rate than we are here on Earth. And that's one of the key critical differences between the comedy recycling theory and standard theory. That the real-time rate is different, and that you can tell that just by even looking at the GPS satellite data. Now, again, it's not anywhere near in the same ballpark of a time difference for the small amount of gravitational difference for lifting it up 20,200 kilometers, which is, I mean, by earthly standards, by human standards, that would be a pretty good stair climb to climb up that high. But by universal standards, that's almost nothing. That's a drop in the bucket compared to going out billions and billions of light years from Earth and taking a look at what matter would look like from there. So that's one of the key differences between the comedy recycling theory point of view and the standard theory point of view. Again, that's one of those things you can actually check for yourself, that the GPS satellite they must slow the atomic clock down on it by about 38.5 microseconds per day, because it's gaining that much extra time just from spending time in a lesser gravitational field. Now, something has to account for that difference. So, however you account for it, the comedy recycling theory says that the matter up there is actually in greater real time, that it's actually spending more real time than we are here on Earth. We don't necessarily feel slowed down as compared to it, like the astronauts couldn't tell you the difference between the time rate here and the time rate there. It wouldn't be something that they would be aware of, but there is a time difference, and it does add up over a prolonged period of time. But again, that's one of those comedy recycling theory differences. You can read more about it at www.cr-theory.org. Thanks for stopping by. Thanks for listening. Thanks for paying attention.